What if the most difficult, painful things you'd rather not face actually hold the keys to deeper freedom and self-compassion? What if it's not the unpleasant feelings themselves that cause suffering, but the meaning we attach to those feelings? And what if the way you interpret your experiences can either trap you or free you? Now, I know all of this sounds pretty abstract, but when it comes to the spectrum of human experiences, from suffering to joy and everything in between, making meaning is actually necessary if you want to move beyond survival strategies and really thrive in your life. So to look at the meaning of gender, I've shared 7 different root factors that can lie behind someone's gender dysphoria in my recent Hidden Roots series. We learned that there can be vastly different conflicts, drivers, and desires behind someone's identity. Then, in my last video, to build upon these multifaceted roots of gender dysphoria, I invited you to rethink your definition of what it means to be trans. Rather than an essential and fixed part of your innermost core, I suggest that trans is a strategy, a series of psychological, social, physical, and medical behaviors which people can lean on to try to alleviate their distress and to relate to themselves and to the world around them differently. Now, I think gender dysphoria holds a lot of meaning. It offers us a powerful symbol and a signal about the challenges, tensions, and longings that are relevant for each person. And of course, the name of this channel is The Metaphor of Gender. So what do I mean about gender as a symbol, as a signal, and as a metaphor? Well, in part, this is about how we use language. Like the phrase born in the wrong body or I feel like a woman on the inside. Taking a metaphorical lens here means we get curious about the experiences being conveyed through these statements. Remember, symptoms and experiences as metaphor don't mean that the feelings aren't real. It just means that these feelings should be approached with curious, non-judgmental attention, and they invite us to read between the lines and go beyond the surface. Now, to flesh this out further, let's take an example from the Hidden Roots series about family role vulnerability. Let's say a boy grows up with a father who's overbearing, aggressive, punitive, and very rigid towards him and his mom. This is likely to frighten the boy and might create an association between being a man and all the scary, unpleasant, and dangerous behaviors he sees in his father. So this little boy may feel much closer to his mother and to women in general. Perhaps the ease and relaxation that he feels in the presence of women, especially compared to being around his dad, leads him to identify with women much more than he identifies with men. And of course, this is a completely understandable response to want to align with the warmth he experiences in the presence of female figures. And as a young child, maybe he's fully embraced by the women in his life as they take a nurturing and caring role towards him. But as he gets older, he also begins to feel somewhat separate, different, and alienated from women because he's a guy and he's growing into manhood. As adolescence and adulthood approach, they pull him further from his feelings of safety and protection as he becomes a man. Now, he gets distressed about his inability to be part of the world he identifies with the most, the world of women. This emotional alignment begins as an identification with femininity and with women. But there could be a subtle shift from identifying with women to identifying as a woman. As he grows older, he might try to recreate the experience of connection and safety by actually becoming a woman himself. This shift from symbolic alignment to literal identification is a great example of taking a metaphor and making it something concrete. Now, when this happens, it's really important that we pause, recognize it, and get curious about what's going on. I want to propose a similar concept you might not have heard of before, and it comes from the world of medical anthropology. This is the term idioms of distress. It describes the way culture shapes our understanding and expression of suffering. Because from one country to the next, and from one era to the next, How we all understand distress, suffering, and difficulties can change pretty dramatically. Neurologist Suzanne O'Sullivan puts it this way: Western medicine encourages a literal approach to symptoms. Doctors expect people to be able to verbalize and intellectualize their problems when asked to do so. Slaves to methodology, protocols, and technology, we are losing the vital skills required to decode our patients' stories. Only in an implausibly perfect, analytic world would it ever be possible to fully dispense with metaphors for distress. I believe gender dysphoria is one of our culture's relevant metaphors of distress. In some cultures, distress is expressed through visions or seizures. In others, people report physical paralysis or unexplainable pain. In ours, right now, gender dysphoria, feeling like the other biological sex, or like both sexes, or like no sex at all, or feeling that masculinity, femininity, pronouns, and medical transformation hold the keys to greater well-being, well, I think for some people, all of this has become a symbolic language, a way for people to describe what doesn't feel right on the inside. And look, this is normal. We are all a product of time and place to a large degree. The cultural messages around us offer us a lens through which we understand our experiences. We unconsciously borrow the symptoms and conditions that are currently available in our time and place. In other words, while suffering and complex emotions are universal, the specific form that they take is culturally mediated. My invitation here is that we just remain curious about what parts of our distress are symbols of something deeper and notice the specific shape and form that they take. So I invite you to ask, why this particular expression of distress? Why now? And what could the meaning and significance of this all be if I look beyond the literal expression and consider this a metaphor? And just to be clear, none of what I'm proposing here is meant to imply that trans isn't a viable strategy. I think it really could be. And I'm also not implying that it's wrong per se to look at a metaphor as something more concrete or literal. All I'm asking is for you to consider that the literal version of the story maybe isn't the only one. Just like our example of the little boy who identified with womanhood and then identified as a woman, there were important emotional experiences, difficulties, and calls for attention that lie behind the symbolism. What was that distress trying to say to him? Where did it come from? And what is really being asked of him if he wants to find meaning and healing? So when it comes to your own experience of gender dysphoria, questions like these can't fully be answered just by consuming information or watching videos like this one. But I do believe these are the right kinds of questions to be asking. So I'll encourage you to just take some time, slow down, and honestly reflect on these sorts of questions for yourself. For example, when you think about your own experience of distress, how has it shown up in symbolic ways? What is the culturally mediated language that you've found useful to express difficulties in your life? And can you think of other idioms of distress that you see around you in our culture right now that maybe weren't as prominent a few years ago, or maybe didn't even exist at all? Let me know in the comments below. I really love to hear from you guys. And that's it for today. Keeping one foot in reality and one in possibility. I'll see you next time. And if you want to keep watching, you're going to like this video. This information is meant for educational purposes only and not as a substitute for mental health services.